There are like 15 photographs of it.
I know, but did they take the pictures?
They took the pictures. But when you take a picture on the moon, remember, they're not looking through a viewfinder. The camera was strapped to their chest. I have a photo. The fact is, the only way you aim the camera was with your body in your spacesuit.
Okay.
And you're sitting behind a glass.
Hasselblad.
Hasselblad, very high quality camera, but they're not looking at the scene. They're looking at the scene and they're taking pictures by moving their whole body, so they may not have even seen this. It was so far away. It's in the bottom of a crater which is the size of a football field.
Well, who found it?
I did.
You did?
I'm the first guy to find it, of course. What do you think? That's why you're here, aren't you?
Okay,
That's what we do over here.
Okay, yeah.
You know, read the book.
You found a robot head in a photograph in the bottom
In
of the
14 photographs. It was photographed again and again and again and again as part of the panorama sequence.
Okay.
We are trying now to go, we've gotten 2 copies of film, not just the web, but film, which was really crappy copies that were sent to us. Mm-hmm. And what I was able to do, edit, put computer robot comparison with C3PO, I was able to take 2 of those images and superimpose them very carefully, one on top of the other. This is a standard photo technique for amplifying signal and averaging noise, because every photograph has noise. If you do that, the mathematical equation says that you drive down the noise by the square root of the number of frames you can successfully, carefully superimpose. Ultimately, we got 14 frames to play with. I need higher resolution, but I've done some playing around in the computer with even those frames, and you get very interesting results. The 2 frames that were actually film that we used, we were able to superimpose them, and that's when the eyes popped out. The round irises, the camera eyes that tell me this is not a desiccated human being lying there on the moon. One of the lunar colonists that we were positing was there at one point. This is an artificial life form, a robot. We've called it Data's head. Doesn't look like Data, looks much more like C3PO, which opens the whole doorway to what does George Lucas know and when did he know it. And if you want, I can go there and really curl your eyebrows, because we have more data that Lucas is involved up to his eyebrows in this whole interesting story and plot and conspiracy. And that's why George Lucas is so successful with those films. It's not an accident.
Okay, now I do want to go there.
We'll go there in a minute.
We have time to go there. Bill?
Yeah, I have a question, Richard, if I may, which I know has been asked by some other people. I could understand how Data's head could have been captured on film accidentally, because it was quite a while back and they weren't focusing
14
on
times.
the Hasselblads. But with these very large structures that you've identified on your photographs, these would clearly have been in the background for the astronauts who were taking those images. Why would they have permitted those images to be in the background when all they have to do is to take the photograph the other way?
This is a photograph taken from Apollo 14. This is a photograph taken by Alan Shepard, who was the commander. Looking north, here's Edgar Mitchell, who I debated about all this on Art Bell Show in 1996. Here's Mitchell's shadow. Here's the incredible background dome that's arching over Mitchell that he's apparently totally oblivious to. And here is an inset area where, because I have an original print of this priceless image, saved from deliberate destruction by NASA, by a gentleman named Ken Johnston in 1971, I believe, saved for 30 years and then physically handed to me in Seattle in 1995, where I was able to put it on a computer scanner, which is pretty primitive then compared to what we have now, scan it, turn up the brightness, turn up the gain, and bingo, out popped all this astonishing geometry. When I zoomed in on the print, because I could scan it at higher and higher resolutions, I found a succeeding series of really amazing, detailed versions of what was on the frame. You can see that at the horizon there is this lateral scaffolding, that there are angled, what we call them is buttresses, that come down at an angle from somewhere in the distance. There's multiple leveled three-dimensional cross bracing. There's something here that looks like a bullet hole in a windshield, like I took a 45 and shot, you know, so the glass is all shattered all around it, scattering light. Notice the color. The color is real. This is buried in the blue emulsion layers of the multi-layered ectochrome of the original ASA 64 film that they took to the moon and shot all those pictures with. They didn't make prints. They made transparencies. Then in the darkroom, they made intermediate prints. And in the darkroom, Bill, to answer your question, they took out all the good stuff.
But they
They simply erased it in the darkroom.
And they didn't have colour film on the first...
No, they did.
had it
No, they had color film. In fact, they had a super color film, which is a whole other story. I actually knew the inventor at EG&G who invented it. I tracked using it. I actually had rolls of it to use myself. When I was at CBS, I went to the Cape. I had a huge gun camera built for me by one of the key photographers in the press corps. I think he was a freelance guy. He worked for AP, he worked for Newsweek, People Magazine, whatever. He actually built this huge camera. It looked like a rifle. And I would aim it like that with a trigger that would trigger the 35 millimeter camera with this special film. And I took photographs of the launch of the Saturn V on Apollo 8, the first mission to the moon. CBS then flew me by helicopter from New York to Boston, where the lab was, and out to the lab, and Charlie, my friend Charlie Wyckoff, developed while I watched that film. I then took the helicopter back to New York, and we put the film on the air to show what the Saturn V launch would look like with this incredible super extended range color film, which NASA had developed secretly to take to the moon. They then destroyed the lab that was built specifically to make this film.
NASA destroyed the lab.
NASA destroyed the
Okay.
lab. Well, Kodak, at NASA's behest. Because Charlie was asked to give the film to Kodak as part of a evaluation for eventually putting it out in the marketplace. So you and I could basically have, that's, by the way, what the gold film now that is commercially available in drugstores, that's a version of Charlie's super wide latitude color transparency film. It was taken to the moon. They used it to take the first generation pictures with those Hasselblad cameras. They then brought it back to the darkrooms in Houston. They then made intermediate generational copies and prints. And in the darkroom, all the offending ruins were removed.
Yes.
This is why this print is so important, because this is from a first generation unaltered print without the things taken off.
It was the movie colour film that I was referring to in Apollo 11 that wasn't used, but it could have been. Am I right about that?
Well, they had a color camera,
Right.
and they had a black and white camera.
Okay.
They only used the black and white, and they used it in a reduced sensitivity mode, because if they had used it in the original design mode, built by Westinghouse, it would have shown the ruins behind Apollo 11. That's, by the way, why the original Apollo 11 tapes have disappeared. They dare not let them loose. With modern computer technology, can you imagine what we would find on them?
Sure.
Except those shadowy figures dancing around on the moon, where there, if you know what you're looking for, even on those pictures there are hints. But there's this enormous element of plausible deniability, because people can say, oh, that's just bad photography, bad lighting. So there's no proof. This is now the inset showing Mitchell, and showing where we did this, and showing the stunning three-dimensional geometry of the glass. We call this Mitchell under glass. And yet when I talked to him on the Bell Show and debated him, he claimed to have seen nothing. And I gave him a pass at that time, because I thought that part of the problem had to do with the fact that he literally could not see. This is now a close-up showing what I call the bullet hole. Notice all the 3D geometry, this amazing three-dimensional lattice, and you can see the stair steps of brilliant glass shining, and the lunar surface is overexposed, because remember, this is very dim. This is probably the consistency of cigarette smoke. It is so fine because it's been beaten and beaten and beaten to death by an incessant micrometeoric rain. So after how many millions of years, there's almost nothing left. But there was enough left to take pictures and bring them home.
To piggyback on Bill's question, why would they leave any trace? Do they want someone to find it? Did they want you to find it?
Let me continue the logic train, then we'll get to that.
Okay.
This is a curve, a light curve of human visual sensitivity. Our visual sensitivity peaks in what's called the yellow-green, which is where the solar spectrum peaks, by the way, so that's probably not an accident. And as you can see, as we go toward the red end of the spectrum, it gets really low down